finally, with this experience with context-free grammars in hand, I want to revisit some problem case studies for finite state models. So we previously identified several problem cases in English syntax for finite state models that included multiple prepositional phrase attachment, nested if-then sentences, and multiply center embedded object extracted relative clauses. And we're going to revisit each of these cases using context-free grammars. And today I'm only going to cover the first two because the third one will turn out to be a little more complicated, but we'll get to it the next time. So the first case, multiple prepositional phrase attachment. So let's actually go back. These are things like the joke about the woman with an umbrella on the street. More and more interpretations as you get more and more prepositional phrases. And you may recall that the problem was actually not in the weak generative capacity of a finite state model, but in the strong generative capacity. The finite state model could say which strings are okay, but it could not give different descriptions for all of the different interpretations of a multiple prepositional phrase case. It turns out that if we take this original grammar that we started with, this is the very first example, all we need to do is to add more lexical rewrite rules, just add words and their parts of speech to the grammar, and we're already set. So I'm going to do that. So here are the words, a, and, joke, woman, umbrella, street, about, with, and on. The first two are determiners, the next four are nouns, and the last three are prepositions. And let's see what happens. So let's start with the first example, a joke about the woman. There's only one interpretation here in terms of which words are associating with which, and correspondingly, what you'll find, if you look at this carefully, is that there's only one structural description that this grammar affords to this sentence. And that's great, so that's success. But that's an easy case. What about adding with an umbrella? You may remember that there were two possible interpretations. Is the umbrella is with an umbrella saying something about the woman? Does the woman possess the umbrella? Or alternatively, is the umbrella involved in the joke but not necessarily in the possession of the woman? And it turns out that this grammar automatically affords two structural descriptions with the noun phrase as the start symbol for that word sequence, a joke about the woman with an umbrella. In one of them, the woman with an umbrella is a phrase. It's a single phrase entirely under an NP node. Whereas in the other, you'll see the woman with an umbrella is not. So this is actually not a single phrase. And that description actually, that multiplicity of interpretations corresponds to the multiplicity of interpretations at the semantic level. In the former case, with an umbrella is saying something about the woman, so in particular that the woman has an umbrella. In the latter case, it doesn't say something about the woman, rather it's saying something about the joke. And so we see that those two interpretations actually come out automatically from the phrase structure description. And this even works, and I'm not going to go into detail on this, but this even works when we add another prepositional phrase. You may remember that there were 5 interpretations for a joke about the woman with an umbrella on the street, and it turns out there are exactly 5 context-free structural descriptions for that word sequence under that grammar, and this is them. And I encourage you to inspect these in greater detail offline. That's the first example. The second example is nested if-then sentences. So these are cases like if students do well in class then they're rewarded, if students do well in class then they're rewarded, the teacher is doing a good job, and so forth. Okay, so it actually turns out I'm going to use a very simple example of dogs, cats, and mice, chasing, seeking, walking, watching. It turns out that a very, very simple grammar gets all of the sort of overall characteristics that you want. All I need to do is say that now there are 2 rewrite rules for the start symbol S. Either an S, a sentence can consist of a noun phrase or a verb phrase, and a verb phrase, or it can consist of the sequence if S, then S. And let's see what we get out of this. If dogs chase cats, then mice like dogs. That's okay. I use the if S then S rule once, and then the next time the next 2 S's that resulted, here and here, I use the S goes to NPV rule. But also, I can embed an if inside the first S. So if dogs chase cats, then mice like dogs, then cats chase mice. And I can do this as many times as I want. If, remember, if it is the case, that if it is the case, that if it is the case, that dog chase cats, then mice likes dogs, then cats chase mice, then mice seek dogs. And as an exercise, I want you to notice that you could also alternatively embed the if-thens on the second S as well, and you can think about whether that's the right thing. It turns out that it will be. So those are the first 2 examples, and I'm going to stop here for today. The third example, once again, is object extracted relative clauses. That's a very interesting case, and it's going to get us to the point where we have to add more very interesting, theoretically, apparatus that really sort of shows some of the richness and flexibility of natural language syntax. So we'll get to that next time. But for now, remember that context-free grammars offer not only, as you can see, a more satisfactory weak generative capacity account, because the if-then cases were not even within the weak generative capacity of finite state models. They also offer a strong generative capacity account that gives us these structural descriptions that can be used in many, many productive ways in building an overall broader theory of language, both within syntax and in the interface between syntax and multiple levels, like both meaning and prosody. Thanks.